Senate Bill 1600, amending sections 362161 and 362301 ARS relating to abortion.
That's the third read of Senate Bill 1600. Vote at the bell. Have you all voted? Have you all voted? Representative Griffin, are you voting or are you speaking?
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I'd like to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you, members. 1600 only applies to babies born alive, not stillborns. I'd like to tell you a story about a friend of mine that came in from northeastern the United States to Arizona. And he explained to me the reason he came to Arizona, because he was a hospital administrator back in that state. And what they did when babies were born alive because of a botched abortion, they covered that baby up, wheeled it over to the corner, turned off the lights, and left the room. He came to Arizona because he could not live with himself for that reason. Senate Bill 1600 requires medically appropriate and reasonable care. Standards of care are nothing new, and the bill clearly defines those standards. Doctors are very familiar with these standards of care, and they know what is required of them. No doubt, doctors and nurses who work in these environments have a very difficult job. This bill does not require them to do anything more than what they have sworn an oath to do, and they would ordinarily choose to do. It simply requires them to do what they can for every baby born alive. And with that, I vote aye.
Griffin votes aye. Representative Peshlikai.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to just make a comment.
You may explain your vote.
Yes, I'll explain my vote. And thank you. There are many ways that we can determine a life that is given to us as a mother, as a parent. And we experienced this a lot of times in the Navajo. But the Navajo people, some of us, we still practice our ways. And we had faced that with one of my niece. She gave birth to a baby girl, a beautiful baby girl, but it was born with a brain that wasn't fully developed. And she tried to have it put on a machine to keep her alive, hanging on to her. But that life was never given to her. And to this day, it still stays with her to see if the doctors had done enough for her to develop a brain when we know it's not possible. So even a wild animal knows when their babies or there's something wrong with them, they'll just shoo them away. So it's very hard as a mother to let go of a child, even though it knows the medical people cannot help them. So it's a blessing to be given a life for an hour. For so many years, you can live to be 100. But if you survive the deformities that you are born with, to suffer these consequences with life-saving techniques that the doctors can give you. So with that, I vote no. Ahiahe Shananta.
Peshlikai votes no. Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I'd like to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
I'm going to start by saying with God, all things are possible. And if God wants a human being to live and have life, that human being will survive. And some of the horror stories heard about babies being born at 22 weeks and being left there for an hour without receiving medical care until they die, that's heartbreaking. But today I'm going to share a story about a friend I have, and her name is Ashley. 3 months ago, she gave birth to her baby at 25 weeks old. I got to watch over the next 3 months as that baby fought to live, and as that hospital staff did everything they could to make sure that she would be okay. My friend Ashley named that baby Justice. And the reason that she named her that was because she felt all of those babies who didn't get that chance to live. She wanted to support them by giving her the name Justice. And with that, I vote aye.
Jones votes aye. Representative Martinez.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, with your permission, I'd like to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
We hear all the time about women's reproductive rights. We hear about a woman's right to choose. We hear, when does a life become a life? Is it a fetus? Is it a baby in the womb? What is it? And so we have this rigorous debate about when a woman is pregnant, whose life is more important? Who's a baby, who is a person, and who is a fetus or stem cells? This bill literally talks about when the baby is out of the womb. Born alive. That means a child is no longer in the womb. That means a child is a child and not a fetus, not a bunch of stem cells. It means that a child was born alive. Now, for a doctor to have to be told by law, by the state of Arizona, you must attend to a human in need is sad and ridiculous. Now we're having a conversation about when a child who is born should get help. Whether or not we should just throw a blanket on it, because you know what? It's only a couple of hours old. You know what? It's only 3 hours old. It's only 5 hours old. It's only a day old. Well, how long are we going to go when it's 2 years? When it's 2 years old? At what point will my colleagues across the aisle, and I ask you with all due respect, when does that become a person? When does a child become a person? I say in the womb, and I for dang sure say after it's been born. And with that, I proudly vote aye. And for all the babies that we have lost who are in heaven, God bless you. We are doing everything in our power. And with that, with respect to God, I proudly vote aye.
Martinez votes aye. Representative Biasucci.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I'd like to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
I just wanted to read quickly the overview of this bill. It entitles an infant who is born alive to be treated as a legal person under Arizona law with the same rights to medically appropriate and reasonable care and treatment. Requires healthcare professionals to take all medical appropriate actions to preserve the life and health of the infant who is born alive. in what world do we live in that if you ever went to the emergency room for any reason, heart attack, stroke, car accident, in what world do we live in where we would be okay with the doctor saying, you know what, this doesn't look good, we're gonna let you die? That would never happen, ever, in any hospital. They would never just walk away and let you die. They would do everything in their power to save your life. This is exactly the same thing, but dealing with a child who is born alive. To think that we would turn our backs to a child and say, or an infant to say, look, this doesn't look great, we're just gonna ignore you, that is inhumane. So I'm proud to stand with my Republican members here who are pro-life, who will do whatever it takes to make sure a child that is born with whatever condition, that every single measure is taken to make sure that baby survives. And with that, I vote aye.
Mr. Biasucci votes aye. Representative Stahl Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Yes. As I'm listening to the conversation back and forth on both sides of this aisle, I think what is very clear, there are things when it comes to pregnancy outcomes that we don't agree on. And I think the medical professionals do not need to be told how to do their job. I think that for us to intervene and create mandates for doctors when they are the ones that have put in the time and the training, who understand their profession better than I could understand that profession, and the very people we rely on to guide us with our medical decisions and certainly with our pregnancy outcomes. It's not my job to tell them how to do theirs. And I think it's okay to disagree. And I think it's okay to disagree respectfully, because at the end of the day, the people who are in the room when it comes to pregnancy outcomes are the people who need to be able to make their decisions as a team. I have no business being in that room with anybody else with any mandate that I think I should give. And with that, I vote no.
Stahl Hamilton votes no. Representative Heap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
There probably isn't any issue that's more hotly contested in our politics today than the fight between pro-life and pro-abortion factions. But I thought that almost all of that dispute centered around the question of when is the baby a person? When does it have rights? And where I thought we had all agreed was that once a baby was born, that this was a person that had rights and dignity and deserved to be treated with respect. But we see that that is not the case, apparently. This bill, stripped of all the politicking and all disguise, comes down to a simple question. If a baby is born alive, even if it is sick or troubled, do we make efforts to try to save that person and treat them with the same dignity we would any other human being in our hospitals, or do we leave them on a table to die? My daughter was born quite a bit premature. She weighed less than 3 pounds when she was born. She spent her early life in the neonatal intensive care unit. And now, as I look at her, my beautiful daughter, she is one of the lights of my life. And the thought to me that any doctor or anyone would have said, because this was a difficult case and there was risk, that my daughter should just have been allowed to die. It is repellent, it is evil. I vote aye.
Heap votes aye. Representative Colladin.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I rise in order to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
We have taken a lot of hard votes on this floor and in committee. And the hard votes that we've always taken were because our regard for the Constitution as conservatives overrode any other interests, the interests of re-election, the interests of policy goals, or anything like that. But we on the right, at least many of us, have been willing to make those hard votes. And here we have a situation where we have a class of persons, new infants, who are being completely deprived of due process of law. They're being deprived of life without due process of law. The only crime that these babies have committed is the crime of being born. That is unconstitutional, and it is unjust. It is also dehumanizing, the fact that our law exists this way right now. It cheapens human life not just for babies, but for all of us, as does abortion generally. And furthermore, as a parent, I would say this. The current state of the law is that you can ask a doctor, please save my baby. You know, because we've heard comments it should be the doctor's decision. They're the medically trained one. I refuse to believe that a parent who's there pleading, please save my baby, would ever think that the doctor should be able to have a say in that. If a doctor wants to say in that, like one of my colleagues, they can run for this body. But being a doctor and being a policymaker are very different things. Our goal is to safeguard the rights of parents. Our goal is to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. And for those reasons, I vote aye.
Call it and votes aye. Have you all voted? Hernandez, Cano, Montenegro, Ortiz, Shaw, Salmon. Please vote. Ms. Travers.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
So I hit my RTS button several times on and off and on and off, trying to think about if I wanted to respond to any of the comments that I've heard today. And I don't know if I can make it through a vote explanation, because I have been through something like this. And while I respect the comments from my learned colleagues on the other side, I think part of the biggest problem is that we are not being heard. There is an assumption that if there is a child that has an issue where the life could be saved, that it wouldn't be saved and somebody wouldn't try to save it. But you've just heard a story from one of my colleagues that a child was born without half a brain. Without half a brain. What life do you think that child would lead? How do you think, are we making the assumption that those parents are going to be able to deal with that child and their disability should it survive more than a few hours outside of the womb? Who do we think we are? Who do we think we are? We are legislators. And as my fellow colleagues talk about God, we are not God. We are human beings and we are legislators. And we know what we can handle and we know what we can't. And unless we start creating some kind of beautiful utopian society where we can take care of every single child that is born out of the womb without a brain, then please make sure that you vote to let's go ahead and save the life of this baby that's going to live 2 hours without a brain. But I don't hear anybody offering that. I don't hear anybody saying, hey, bring him over to my house. I'll take care of that child. So, yeah?
Members, please keep your voices and your hands to yourself while members are explaining their votes. Thank you. Please continue.
I don't want to continue on, but my pregnancy story is I've lost one, delivered stillborn. I had my uterus ripped in half with one. I spent 2.5 months in a hospital and delivered one emergency C-section. One early, One they thought had Marfan syndrome, and I don't know how we would have handled that as a parent. So when we're making these votes
10 seconds.
about life and death, please remember we are human beings. We are legislators. We are not God. And when we start to think we are,
Time.
that's our problem.
How do you
Thank you
vote?
very much, sir.
Thank you. How do you vote?
And with that, I vote no.
Travers votes no. Representative Harris,
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I rise to explain my vote.
please proceed.
It wasn't until Representative Griffin presented her reason, I suddenly remembered something. I'm a fairly well-traveled person because I'm on a lot of boards. And at events, they were just business events. I would often come across a person without a limb. And I'm just a person, I get to know people, I talk to them. And in the 3 or 4 times in all my travels that this has happened, I do recall them telling me I am the product of a botched abortion or something of the like. Not a single one of these people said to me, I wish I were aborted. They are happy to be here. They are functioning human beings that are grateful to be here because God made a decision to let them be here, whether they had limbs or not. And with that, I vote aye.
Harris votes aye. Representative Diaz.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I would rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Life is sacred, and we are told that life is sacred because we are created in the image of God. And no, we are not God. However, we know the heart of God through the Holy Scriptures. God treats life as sacred, and life begins at conception and not at birth. And that's been an argument that we've had on the floor, but my heart is settled on that. That's not a point of argument for me. That's settled in my heart. My daughter has had miscarriages, and it is painful to go through. I've lost a child, and that's very painful to go through. The fact is that we live in a fallen world. It's not a utopia, and it's going to be, there's accidents, there's disease, and there's death, and that's part of life. Here are the underlying implications, though. When we start thinking that life can be dealt with at our own discretion and decision, and left to die on a table and not give medical attention, and even through the act of abortion, how we treat life in the beginning and how we view life will also determine how we view life at the end. Now, I want you all to think about that because it's really important. How we treat life in the beginning and the end also, and we have been struggling with this situation as legislators, is how we treat life in between. We're wondering where does all of this murder and killing why is this all taking place? And I submit to you, members, that it's because of our view of how we are viewing life in the beginning and at the end, and now we're killing each other in between. Let's settle this in our own hearts, and I know that many of you have, that life is sacred because we are created in the image of God. We will do everything we can to help these children that are born alive after botched abortion to give every medical means and attention to it. With that, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I vote aye.
Diaz votes aye. Representative Bliss.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, with your permission to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
As a healthcare provider, I think it's really important that we understand, because I heard some folks talk earlier about making decisions of life and death at the time of birth. It's important to understand that it's not in our purview or our protocols to make those decisions of who lives and who dies. I want to share a story, and this ties into the concept of a slow code. You heard the story earlier about justice. I want to end with justice as well. But L'Oreal, she is another infant that was born full term after doctors predicted she would be premature. She survived, though, and thrived her first week. When she died soon after, her parents grieved not only for the loss of their daughter, but they had this nagging sense that she was slow-coded because she had trisomy 18. The parents were warned some healthcare professionals use a slow code to hasten a newborn's death if they judge them not to live or are not expecting them to live very long. But L'Oreal beat the odds, and her parents wanted to give her every opportunity to continue the fight. They were devastated. Nicole testified to their accounts of an OB-GYN who testified to the reality that doctors can be wrong about their prognosis. And that's where I want to bring justice back. And let's show a picture. This is a real person, a baby born alive. As you can see, here she is, newborn, a person who has every chance at life. And we need to give her that chance. She deserves that life-saving treatment. And then look at this picture of her now, thriving, because we gave her that opportunity. We gave her medically appropriate and reasonable care.
Let's not bring
and that's why I
things
vote
to the
aye.
floor that are not approved by the speaker, members. That includes signage, political statements, T-shirts with fancy slogans, pictures, not approved. And that's how you lose your speaking privilege. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This policy is really simple. I believe life begins at conception and ends at natural death. But between that time when a human is born, every life is valuable, precious, worthy, and it should be rewarded full protection. A civilized society never denies someone the health care, the medical care that they need to survive when they're born. It's inhumane to leave a baby without medical care to suffer and struggle to death after they've been born. Arizona law should not allow for the killing of a live baby, even by neglect. And I'm thankful for my seatmate, my senator over there, for running this bill and looking out for the next generation of Arizonans and Americans so they can live long and happy lives that God has intended for them. That I vote aye.
Smith votes aye. Representative Wen.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Being a Catholic, I'm a little bit more practical, and I think about when it's my time to go up to the gate, and hopefully I'll be up in the gate. And I think about this question all the time when St. Peter looks at me in the eye and said, "Hey, Kwong, have you done everything you can to protect the unborn, the children without a voice?" I have several options to answer that question. I can say, "St. Peter, you know what? I'm not responsible because I'm waiting for the doctors. I was waiting for the doctors to make those decisions for me." Or the other one, being a politician, I may say, "St. Peter, there's a thing called separation of church and state." And honestly, I can tell you either one of those answers will not get the gate open for me. So I'm just saying that if I'm wrong in my beliefs, I think everybody here is okay. But if I'm right, oh boy, with that I vote aye.
Representative Wen votes aye. Representative Selman.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Members, I want to be clear. SB 1600 is not about abortion. Arizona prohibits abortion after 15 weeks of gestation. SB 1600 is a cruel and misguided attempt to interfere with evidence-based medical decision-making between patients and their physicians. This bill is not based in science or medicine. What the bill does is incite emotions rather than reflect the reality of evidence-based clinical care. This is legislative interference that will harm families and hinder the ability of physicians to practice such evidence-based medicine. The bill would impede families from making significant quality of life decisions, such as being able to provide comfort or spiritual care in tragic and painful situations. These incredibly difficult medical decisions should be made by patients in consultation with their physicians and without any external or political interferences. Instead, this bill takes decision-making out of the hands of families in crisis and limits the freedom of patients to make decisions that are right for them. SB 1600 would impact tragic and often unexpected medical situations that arise in the hospital setting where delivery of a baby occurs in situations or at gestational ages that are incompatible with sustained life. In these situations, the expertise of a fellowship-trained neonatologist helps determine whether there is any chance that heroic medical interventions will be effective. In those instances where medical interventions will be futile, healthcare providers can help families by providing comfort care for the baby and providing the families an opportunity to hold their baby, spending those precious few moments of life with their loved ones and spiritual services as requested. This bill will instead force unprepared families to watch a swarm of doctors doing procedures on the baby under threat of felony prosecution until there is an opportunity for the family to learn about their options and the baby's prognosis, at which point they could opt to cease
30 seconds.
intervention. This is forced, futile medical intervention. It is cruel, it is wrong, it is invasive, and with that, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I am a no.
Solomon votes no. Shaw, Montenegro, Hernandez, Cano, please vote. I'm about to close the board. It's been 32 minutes. You will not have the chance to speak. I will be closing the board in 10 seconds. You'll have to vote. Dr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you so much. I appreciated all the discussion on this bill. I think I made quite a few points yesterday on the floor regarding what we see as the consequences of this bill. So with regard to how we treat patients in this kind of situation, we're always, I believe, that we are always using the informed consent model to make sure that we discuss risks, consequences, benefits, alternatives with every patient that comes in, including mothers who have just delivered in any way, especially in the emergency department. That's always been my experience of medical care. So the usual mechanism for how we deal with violations of this is what's civil penalties. People get sued if you don't do the right thing, or can get sued. This bill introduces a criminal penalty in the middle of a very harrowing situation, and that's the part that gives so much of us the heartache. It's the Arizona Nurses Association, Arizona Medical Association, all the healthcare stakeholders are signed in against this bill because we don't want to criminalize what is a harrowing situation and a subjective situation. That's what I want to make sure, that it's not necessarily always clear cut. And so like what you're going to have happen, and what we're concerned about on this side, I'm struggling. I've been struggling because I've spoken to, sponsor of the bill, I've spoken to the two nurses that we have that are representatives here, and I think what we're struggling to understand, I think from both sides, is the idea that even if the intent were to say, make sure that a baby is not unduly ignored with regard to the medical care that was provided, then we also don't want to have good actors who are doing the things that they are supposed to with regard to their medical practice be caught in the net of criminal activity unnecessarily. You don't want to penalize good actors in the middle of this. That's what's being lost, and that's what's going to happen because when the threat of criminal penalty is applied in a very subjective, harrowing situation like this, people are going to say, I'm going to have to do something that I wouldn't otherwise do with regard to medical judgment. So there is subjectivity in medical judgment. I, as a physician, cannot just simply say that in every case, like that I have a crystal ball and I can tell you what's going to happen. So if a baby is born at about 18 weeks, their chances are almost zero. At 26 weeks, decent chance of survival. Somewhere in there are a lot of gray areas, right? And so I say, well, you know, one example that I heard of with regard to the debate I heard was they said, well, continue to do all, and that's what the language of the bill says. But when would a code, a
10
medical
seconds.
code, when would it ever end? It would never end, because it ends when I subjectively decide that the medical code ends and we stop the CPR process. And so anybody can disagree with that and say, Dr. Shaw, you're guilty of a criminal violation.
How do you vote?
And that doesn't work. So with that, I vote no. Thank
Dr.
you.
Shaw votes no. L. Hernandez, M. Hernandez, how do you vote? Lydia Hernandez.
And sir, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I had requested to speak, to explain my vote.
You have. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I wanted to share that one night around 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from whom I'll name Juanita, one of my constituents, whom was cleaning an apartment complex when she heard a woman screaming. She went outside to see a bloodied woman, naked, running through the complex. She was running from someone. Juanita took her in, hit her. She called me to ask what to do. She was being held in a safe house. I told her, call 911 immediately. But she was afraid and fearful for wherever she was being held, that she could also be sat out. We took her to the hospital. We made arrangements with a local detective to take her in. Once they treated her, she was able to identify not only one, but maybe a few safe houses within our district. The woman went on in her journey and went on to Houston, Texas, where her family was waiting for her. A few months later, Juanita got a call. She got a call from the woman, from the victim who had been brutally raped. She called her to thank her many months later, thank her for her help on that night, but also to share that she had given birth to a baby girl, and that she was so appreciative for her help. And finally, I want to share a story about my niece Abby, who was born at 20 weeks at a time when we did not have more of the advanced technology that we have now. Her birthday, by the way, is in about 2 weeks. She'll be 18. I had an especially difficult time regarding this bill before I could even get beyond being able to delve into the details of the bill. However, as I recall the details of her birth, I reflect on how my sister-in-law pleaded with the doctor to do whatever he could to save her baby. The doctor explained the very slight chance for the baby living. I held her in the palm of my hand.
30 seconds.
She survived and is now 18 years old and is a student at Phoenix Union High School. But yet this is one of many, many, many stories. I value life as much as my constituency of West Phoenix, as they do, of whom I deeply respect and care for. And as a community, we continue to get pulled left and right by outside interests in addition to be taken for granted. With that, Speaker Pro Tem, I vote yes.
Lydia Hernandez votes yes. Representative Montenegro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, refusing basic medical care for a newborn is not health care. It's infanticide by neglect. Neglecting a newborn's needs because doctors don't expect him to live is simply unethical. Every human life is valuable and worthy of full protection and a chance to beat the odds. Senate Bill 1600 ensures that every baby born alive has a chance to beat those odds. It doesn't require the draconian efforts that some in this chamber have claimed, nor does it put ethical doctors at risk. It requires healthcare professionals to provide medically appropriate and reasonable care to all newborns. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, medically appropriate or reasonable can look different in various circumstances. It's not medically appropriate or reasonable to whisk a baby away from that baby's mother's arms at 15 weeks gestation. That's actually not reasonable, because we know that that baby, it's probably not going to survive at 15 weeks. It is impossible for a baby at 15 weeks gestation to survive outside the womb. But I want you to know that medically appropriate and reasonable care, although for that baby would look like comfort care, it should not be the norm for other babies who do have a chance or should have a chance at survival. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, healthcare professionals, and I want this to be very clear, healthcare professionals are not at risk for violating that law or this law if they follow ethical standards. Only healthcare professionals who intentionally or knowingly neglect. Now, please note that intentionally and knowingly are terms that are defined in law. Knowingly and intentionally are terms that are defined in our legal processes. If they knowingly and intentionally neglect to provide medically appropriate and reasonable, again, terms that are defined in medical processes, then they would be in violation of Senate Bill 1600. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, let it be known that we stand and say that a civilized society never denies basic medical care to any child that is born alive. And this is why I vote aye, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Representative Montenegro votes aye. Representative Sandoval.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
I was not intending to speak on this today, but I think that we missed the point of this bill. We didn't listen to the explanation from Dr. Shah, who explained the criminal repercussions. We didn't listen to Ms. Salmon when she talked about what the bill is really about. I too am a practicing Catholic. I am pro-life. No one was debating when the life starts and ends. My church teaches that life begins in the womb and ends in the tomb, and we are to protect life from the womb to the tomb. I too believe that, but this has nothing to do with that. And Mr. Montenegro mentioned that knowingly and intentionally neglect to a patient is what we're trying to avoid here. There are already criminal laws. There are already laws in the criminal books that will go after doctors or not doctors that try to do that to anyone. And so with that, I vote no.
Sandoval votes no. Clerk will record the vote. 32 ayes, 26 noes, 2 not voting. You pass Senate Bill 1600. Signed in open session. Clerk's instructed to record the action of the House, convey the bill to the Senate.